So, hello everybody. Thank you for joining us. And for those people who couldn't join us today and are watching this at a later date, we hope that this is helpful to you. I'm Nancy Rose Dufford. I'm the Executive Director for PEN, the Pasadena Education Network. And for those of you who don't know us, we are a network of now more than 2,000 parents who support and send our children to Pasadena Unified School District schools. We support parents in three ways. We not only help parents find the right schools for their family, but once you're in a PUSD school, we provide programs and trainings to help parents engage more effectively with their students and with their schools. We also collaborate with PUSD leadership to advocate for educational equity and to bring the voice of parents to them so that they consider it in their decision making. Because we're a small organization, we can adapt to the needs of parents pretty quickly. In fact, this program and the two other mental health programs that we've hosted are a result of one of our virtual meetups that we had with our PEN Parent Ambassador volunteers. We know that this year has been challenging for everyone and that sometimes we need more than just a glass of wine, especially on a Saturday morning. So that's why we're doing this program, because if you're not healthy, then it's even more difficult for you to support the rest of your family. So now I'm getting feedback. Now I'm going to introduce Laura Diaz Allen. Laura is our Parent Engagement Director. And I also want to thank Jeff Albert and Collaborate Pasadena for hosting us today. And one more thing, if you learn anything, if you value what PEN does, please keep in mind that we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We are not affiliated with Pasadena Unified School District. So if you learn anything, please consider going to our website and making a donation to PEN. Laura, you can take it from here.
So good morning. My name is Laura Diaz. I am the Parent Engagement Director at PEN and the parent of two children who have been stuck at home doing distance learning all year. And so this program was born from parent feedback, but also just from my own sense of, it's been really hard for me to figure out how to support my kids. It's taken a toll on me, just like with other parents. And so I just wanted to do a little reflection on what the year has been before we get into how to take care of ourselves. So just as a little reminder, we've been through a lot. We've been through a year where we've seen political unrest and we've questioned how our society takes care of people. We've been through crazy elections. Of course, we've been through COVID-19 and staying at home, which has been very unnatural. Watching our children trying to learn at home away from their friends and their routines and their sports and their activities has been really tough on many parents. There might have been some silver linings, but it's still been very stressful, which has meant that we've had to look at our routines. We've had to look at how we support our kids with their school, where in the house people sit, and how we negotiate spaces for families that have small homes. They may have had to, take turns using the Wi-Fi or whatever what was required to do school at a distance, plus parents working. Many adults, many parents have perhaps felt grief, maybe guilt at not being able to support their children in a way that they would have liked, especially if they were working out of the home or were working in the home and were too busy. Perhaps we've gone through apathy of just saying, oh, what's the point? This is way bigger than me. Perhaps even anger at the situation and our inability to change things. And many parents may have found themselves trying to balance their own needs with their children's needs. So as a parent, if you are experiencing some depression or anxiety or just wanting to take a break from adulting, but yet you have children who need you, how do you do that, right? So that's been a challenge. And also, maybe a silver lining has been that we may have found some room to reflect on our role as parents, on our dreams for our children, on our expectations. Again, it's been an interesting year, a little bit rough. And we acknowledge that parents need to take care of themselves before they can truly take care of their children. And so today we have Dr. Kumar. Mona is a fellow parent, and a therapist, and she's going to help us reflect a little bit on these things that I've just talked about and give us some tips for how to take care of ourselves. So, Mona, you're on.
All right. Thanks, Laura, and good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here with all of you this morning, and I'm really glad that Penn recognizes the importance of this topic. Of course, we're always prioritizing our children, and that is very important, but we are the ones who provide that with our parents, and so we often forget how important it is to take care of ourselves so that we can be everything that we can be for our children and all the other people enrolled in our lives. So, as Laura just mentioned, we've been through a very unusual year with so many changes, distance learning being one of the biggest ones. And of course, now we're about to embark on another transition as we prepare to go back to school. And all of this change takes a toll on us, of course, on our children, but us as parents as well. And that's going to be the focus of my presentation today. So, where I'd like to start is by talking with you a little bit about the concept of good enough mothering. And of course, nowadays we would probably use more gender neutral terms and say good enough parenting. But this concept was introduced in 1953 by Donald Winnicott, and he was, for those of you who are interested, a British pediatrician and psychoanalyst. And the idea behind good enough mothering is basically that we as parents should strive to provide our children with parenting that is responsive, but not perfect. Partly because the standard of perfection is impossible to meet. We can, to even try is to aim for something that is unrealistic, but also because it's actually not in our children's best interest to try to meet every need. In fact, there's actually value in having our children experience some degree of frustration or uncertainty so that they can learn how to meet some of their own needs. So, of course, this doesn't mean that we are neglecting our children or withholding support. It just means that we're doing what we know how to do. We're learning from our mistakes as we go. We're admitting when we're struggling. Essentially, we're modeling the reality of being a human being. And in the process, we're giving our children a chance to help themselves. So this brings us to the idea of optimal frustration. And this was a principle introduced by Heinz Kohut in 1963. Kohut was an Austrian-American neurologist and psychoanalyst. And optimal frustration, he said, is when a child experiences frustrations that are tolerable. And that's really the key. They need to be tolerable. They can't be so far above what they're capable of that they become overwhelming. They need to be sort of in that just right zone. So these should be frustrations that don't overwhelm the child, as I said, but offer just a little bit of a gap between what they know how to do and the challenges that they're being confronted with. With the idea being that when that gap is manageable, it encourages children, invites them to discover their own ways of coping and self-soothing. In other words, children become more resilient and resourceful when they experience these little gaps. And in the long run, better able to bounce back from the adjustments and difficulties that are an inevitable part of our lives. So, all this to say, please cut yourself some slack. I think one of the worst things we do to ourselves as parents is subject ourselves to intense scrutiny and self-criticism, and we use up all of that good energy doing something that's really not helpful to anyone, not to ourselves and not to our children. Of course, we're trying to do the best we can, but when we get focused on being self-critical, we really miss the boat on being there for our kids and being there for ourselves. Your job is not to meet every single need your child has. As I said, you can't, and it's not good for them. So think about, start by thinking about how you're defining what it means to be a good parent. If you're striving for perfection, if you're feeling really bad when you get it wrong, you're probably holding yourself to very rigid standards. You're stifling your creativity as a parent and really missing out on the fun and enjoyment that parenting can bring. So what is stress? Stress is what we experience when we hold ourselves to unrealistic standards for an extended period of time. And this, of course, segues nicely into our discussion today about the effects of the pandemic, because perhaps never before have we been asked to be so many things to our children for such an extended period of time. So I'm calling this pandemic parenting. Ordinarily, parenting is not a one or two person job. It's typically a collaborative endeavor that involves parents and teachers, our children's extracurricular activities, their friends, the parents of their friends. Often we have extended family members that help, perhaps institutions of faith, and numerous other sources of support. Except, of course, of a year ago, a little over a year ago now, all of that changed. And all of a sudden, we were on our own. So we were parenting, teaching, providing enrichment, childcare, all while continuing to juggle a myriad of other commitments, our jobs, managing our households, plus in many cases having the additional burden of changes in our job situations. For many, there was a loss of income, not to mention, although things are starting to get better now, when this all started, we really didn't know how serious this was, how to keep ourselves and our loved ones safe, and that in of itself was a stressor. So needless to say, the pandemic changed the job description. And Laura, you can change to the next slide. Yeah. Of parenting practically overnight. It was a drastic shift. And we all know that it wasn't a temporary shift. And I emphasize this because I think it's really important to recognize that it's one thing to kind of bear down and get through a crisis, but it's quite another to manage what became an ongoing change in our day-to-day operations. This wasn't a week or 2 week long sprint. This was a marathon, even though that's not what we originally thought it was going to be. And the rules for running a marathon are really very different than a sprint. We're focusing now on endurance and not on speed. So this means the solutions and adaptations that we come up with, they need to be doable for the long run. They need to be amenable to change, and they need to be responsive to feedback. And in order for us to do all this adapting and take care of our children, we need to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves. So before I go into how we can manage our stress, I want to talk a little bit more about how to recognize it. Stress is, of course, a normal part of our lives. We're sometimes faced with difficult circumstances. And for a while, we can do what we need to do to overcome. We can work a little harder, go a little bit above and beyond, and for a while, that's doable. But what happens when the challenge is ongoing? And I think I'm really wanting to emphasize that because the pandemic was not, and the restrictions involved and the distance learning, none of that was short term. We've been doing it for now over a year. And when we keep trying to function beyond our capacity, stress will often turn into anxiety. So, how do we know when we're feeling anxious? There are a lot of ways to tell. One way anxiety shows up is in the form of anger or irritability. So, if you're being short with others, with your children, maybe with your partner, with yourselves, even, that is often a cue that you're running on empty, that you're spread too thin. Other feelings that indicate anxiety are being worried all the time, ruminating, just sort of being really preoccupied with what's happened already or what's going to happen, having difficulty sleeping, difficulty concentrating, or even difficulty relaxing, even though that's the very thing that you want to do. When we're anxious, it can actually be difficult to unwind and let ourselves slow down. And it's really important to pay attention to all these signs because once you recognize them, you can actually do something about it. Um, if you don't pay attention to these signs, if you let your anxiety continue, chances are it's going to get worse and it's going to come out in ways that aren't good for you or for the people that are around you. So, what can we do about it? How can we take care of ourselves, be there for our families and our jobs, and make life more manageable and and enjoy ourselves? Because this isn't just about getting through it, but really about experiencing this new normal and finding ways to make the best of it. So, first, the first thing we can do is change our mindset. Uh, you can go to the next slide, Laura. Yeah, thanks. And by changing our mindset, what this means is changing how we think of ourselves as parents. And as I mentioned earlier, we want to kind of change the way we orient ourselves to parenting. And instead of aiming for perfect parenting, which should never be our goal, we should be striving to be good enough parents. Um, Along with that change in mindset, we should also remind ourselves that this experience is not short term. So as I said before, this is a marathon and not a sprint. So pushing ourselves beyond our capacity for an extended period, for a brief period of time, might work. But when we are dealing with an extended commitment, which is what this has been, it really involves a different approach. We need to think about making a change in our lifestyle, not just doing more of what we've always done. Number two, adjust your expectations. So I think here, what I'd like to share is kind of a real life example that I think a lot of us can, well, perhaps all of us can relate to, um, and that can be applied here. So I want you to think back to when you first became a parent. Think of how much you used to be able to fit into a day, how quickly you could, run around, go to work, get your errands done, maybe pop into the gym or that yoga class on your way home, have dinner, and even a little time for yourself before wrapping up the day. And then remember, and maybe a while for some of us, remember what it was like when your little one first came along, or maybe your any other little ones that did come along after that. All of a sudden, something as simple as a quick trip to Target became your outing for the day. It wasn't as easy to get around to accomplish as much. And the reason I bring up that example is because I think the same is true here. We simply cannot accomplish as much now as we could when we were sharing the responsibility of taking care of our kids and able to access a lot of resources that haven't been available to us for the last year. So, as difficult as it might be to accept, our resources of time and energy and motivation are limited. Um, so, it's really important for us to remember to live within our means, even if that means doing less than what we used to be able to do. Number three, don't isolate. So, I know that we're being asked to isolate, but don't do it. Staying safe and taking precautions doesn't mean disconnecting from everyone. Talk to other parents. Stay in touch with your friends. Stay in touch with your children's friends. Get support. Ask for suggestions. Brainstorm together. You might have an idea that they hadn't thought of. Maybe they've got an idea that really worked for them that you can try out. Um, Perhaps most importantly, talking to other people helps to give you a reality check and reminds you that you're not the only one struggling, that other people are going through a lot of the same things that you are, and that no one is a super mom or super dad, and you don't have to be either. Number four, be more flexible. This is actually a great opportunity to get creative and experiment. This is a good time to try something new. It's okay to bend the rules a little bit. Maybe you ordinarily limited screen time. Let your kids have a little bit more. For many of our children, virtual playdates have become the only social activity that they have right now, and they need it. It's so important for them to still connect with their peers. Maybe you ordinarily provided a lot of structured activities. This might be a good time to give them a little more free play. Or conversely, maybe you kept things pretty loose and unstructured. This might be a good time to experiment with creating more of a schedule. So the idea here is allow yourselves to be playful, to experiment. Give everyone the chance to try something new rather than trying to hold on to conditions that no longer exist. Number five, get help wherever you can. Really, don't underestimate how much even a little break, a little assistance can help to rebalance you, to give you a chance to regroup and come back refreshed. Whatever that may be, maybe it's an after school art camp, maybe it's a sports activity, could be virtual, could be in person. Maybe it's a friend or a family member that you feel comfortable having contact with. Find what's comfortable for you. There's no one right way to do this. And avail yourself of the assistance that you can find. As I said before, you'll be surprised that even a little break can help a lot. Number six, nourish yourself. So I mean this both literally and figuratively. So, of course, we want to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves. We're eating healthy foods. We're getting enough hours of sleep. We're maintaining a regular exercise program. But we also want to do things that bring us comfort, that help us feel refreshed and give us energy. And sometimes these can be things that are really relaxing. Maybe it's, sitting down and, you know, just, taking a break in front of the TV. But sometimes it can even be things that are kind of challenging. The key is that the things that we do that provide us with self-care are things that are affirming, that help us feel more connected with ourselves. Because the more we're connected with ourselves, the more we're able to bring to all of our roles, including that of being a parent. Just remember, there is no parent without you. So that really is such an important thing to remember. I think we often really forget how much our ability to do what we want to be able to do for our children depends on us being, being there first and foremost for ourselves. Uh, Number seven. So, I want to talk a little bit about therapy here. Our lives weren't perfect before the pandemic. I know that when this all started, I think for a lot of us, it was such a stressor. Of course, there were so many new things happening, but it was a stressor, not just because of all the new things that were happening, but also because of the ways in which the pandemic and all the restrictions intensified all the issues that we were experiencing even before the pandemic started. So we all need support, pandemic or not, and sometimes this comes in the form of therapy. Talking to friends is great, but if it's within your resources to seek the support of a trained therapist, I recommend that you do so. Therapists can be objective and helpful um, in ways that people who are more invested in us typically cannot. So you may be able to find a therapist who offers sliding scale rates if your budget is an issue. There are community-based clinics. If you're uncomfortable about the idea of going in person to see your therapist, pretty much all therapists are offering services virtually. You can get referrals from people you know, from your primary care physician. If you go online, there are a lot of therapist directories out there. Psychology Today is one of the more popular ones. So there are a lot of different ways to find a therapist, to find someone who fits your budget and also can work with you in terms of what you're comfortable with, whether that's in person, whether that's through Zoom or over the phone. So finally, I just want to mention a few books and websites that are out there. And this is just a small sampling. There are so many resources available, but these are some books that, I think that just really help us stop and remember how important it is to treat ourselves with compassion and to remember that we're doing the best that we can, and that that being human comes with its limitations, and that we are some of the best teachers of our children when it comes to embracing that, both in ourselves and in them. So there's a few books there that are on that slide, and then on the next one, I've listed a few websites. And again, as I said, there are so many resources online, and that's often just a great way to start, just to even, maybe you're not quite sure, what you need or what would be helpful. Going online is a great way, a very sort of safe, gentle way to start that search, and really kind of validate what you're going through and what might be helpful. So that's what I wanted to share with all of you today. I hope that was helpful. I'm happy to elaborate on anything that I shared, and of course, answer any questions that you might have.
So, hi, I was having a little trouble with my settings. So I know some of you submitted questions or comments as part of your registration for the program. If you remember what those might have been, this would be a great time to bring them up. Okay, so here's a question. How do we know when frustration isn't tolerable?
That's a great question. And this question is from Angie?
Yeah.
Angie, can you say a little bit more about your question? I think it's a great one, but I'd love to hear you.
Well, I mean, I don't know, maybe it is obvious to know when, but just when you're working with your kids, like for me, well, and also I was thinking about it, like for me, maybe something's tolerable, but my daughter, it's not. And so like, I don't know, it's hard. Like, what is the signs that Is it crying? Is it, I don't know,
Right.
sulking? I don't know. What are the signs of
Well,
intolerable?
I think that's a great question, and I think you bring up a good point, because I think what you're talking about is whether a frustration is tolerable objectively or
Yes,
subjectively.
yes,
And
yes.
so you're right. From your perspective, it might look like, hey, you know what? I think my child can handle this. I've seen
Mm.
them maybe take on other challenges that they've been able to manage, and this feels like it's within the scope of what they can probably handle. But you might see a reaction that looks very different from your child. And so I think we definitely, we want to start, you want to start by looking at things objectively, sure. And that's probably why you suggested that they take care of whatever it is that you suggested that they do. But when you see signs from your children that they are feeling overwhelmed, that's a good indication that, at least for them in this moment, it doesn't feel tolerable. That doesn't mean that you rush in and take care of it and do it for them, but it might mean that they need a little bit of assistance getting from where they are now, which is maybe feeling insecure or feeling like they don't know where to start, to getting to that point where they are like, yeah, you know what, I do have the resources for this, or I have done something like this before. And with your support, they can connect with that, rather than feeling like it's just over their heads and not something they can handle.
Thank you. You mentioned something else, which is an issue we're having too, is that I do tend to rush in. Both my husband and I want to fix things immediately, and my daughter is telling me, I just want you to listen, but it's so hard to restrain myself. I don't know if you have tips for, maybe it's just practicing the restraint, but
yeah. Laura, please.
I struggle with this too, Angie, and I'm training myself to remember when my children were starting to walk, and how I just didn't want them to ever fall, right? And if they fell, I felt that pain so viscerally. But I had to make myself let them walk and fall, and when they did, not be overwhelmed with grief, because honestly, they mostly just got up and dusted off and they were fine unless they saw my face. So I'm trying to do that too now that they're teenagers, and Nancy, this is hard for me, but just to let them do it and then see what happens without rushing in. And also just asking them, is this something you need me to help with? And I find that a lot of times if I ask that question, they say no, or not yet, or maybe they tell me a way in which I can help. But again, I'm just having this image of the toddlers trying to walk. And if I had my druthers, they would still be not walking because I never wanted them to fall. So anyway, that's my little thing. But Mona, maybe you have something more professional that you can offer.
No, I think that's a great example. And I mean, I think it's something that we experience as parents from the day we start, and, all through our children's development. So, what this is sort of reminding me of is something that we often get told when our children are having temper tantrums. And maybe this happened more when some of our kids were younger, but one of the things we're often told is, don't walk away from them. You can't always fix it in the moment. You can't, they kind of have to go through it sometimes, whatever that is, if they're crying or they're upset, or they just can't regulate their affect in that moment. That is an experience they have to go through, but we can still be there with them as they go through it. So I think that helps us as parents. The reason I bring that up is because I think it helps us as parents to remember that you can be there for your child without doing something, for them. They still will do it for themselves. They'll still need to learn to do it for themselves, but you can still be there for them. You can be there with them as they go through it.
Mona, you bring.
I found that.
Go
So
ahead.
I found that one of the things that my children are older now and out of school and working and all that stuff. But I found that even with them, I tried to do the same thing I did when they were little. And it was the idea of using those moments to give them confidence that I have in them and saying, you're smart, you can figure this out. If you need my guidance, I'm happy to help you, but you need to tell me that you think you need it. So sort of more putting it on them that I have confidence in them that they can figure this out. And they'll let me know if they can't. And it's hard. It's even hard as young adults to do that. But
Well, you do that as a boss when we're having meltdowns, and I really appreciate it. Because then if you just move to fix it immediately, we wouldn't have a chance to try and see if maybe we could do it, which would give us confidence going forward. So thank you for the informal parenting. But Mona, what you said about just not walking away from a meltdown, I want to revisit that, because one of the things we learned at a previous workshop, which talked a little bit about, the brain and self-regulation and all that, was that it is helpful if the parent can self-regulate so that it helps children regulate, right? So, and you don't think to do that with your teenagers. I remember when my kids were babies and toddlers, I would try to take a deep breath so that they wouldn't get more worked up, right? But that's a really good thing, I think, to remember now that our kids are a little older, is to calm down, breathe, whatever strategies we have, because otherwise we're making each other worse, right? And if,
Absolutely.
right? So I love that you brought that up, to just sit there or be there and regulate our own selves and not worry about them yet, just worry about our own state of mind.
Yeah, I agree, Laura. I think even though we come with the best of intentions when we sort of jump in to fix, we inadvertently give our children the message that it's not okay to struggle. And, of course, that's not true. It is okay to struggle. In fact, it's inevitable that we're going to struggle, and our ability to tolerate those moments are going to help us, work through those struggles and be more successful in the long run, versus feeling like, oh no, something's wrong, I'm struggling, I need to get at it, I need to get out of this.
And I think another thing we picked up at one other workshop is the idea to name the feelings, right? So it may be that if our children are in overwhelm, they have no idea what they're feeling and they can't tell you. And so that we could try naming something like, oh, this feels really overwhelming, or this feels frustrating, or it must feel frustrating, just to kind of get them started on the idea that they might find a name for whatever it is that they're feeling. So I'm trying that one out.
I think it really means a lot to not just our children, to any of us, when we feel empathized with, so when we feel like our parent, in this case, understands what we're going through. So it's great, to feel like our parent believes in us, but it's also nice to know that they can understand what we're experiencing. I can see that you're really nervous about this, assignment, or, I can see that you're not sure where to even start. I can see that you are, you're confused, so yes, Laura, exactly. Just like you said, the more we can name their experience, the more they feel seen and the more manageable it becomes, because it's not just something that's in their heads, but now it's something they're sharing with their parent.
This other thing comes to mind, which is that, again, when my children were younger, I felt that anytime I took care of myself, I was taking time away from them and from my parenting. And I had a really hard time doing something as basic as going to yoga once a week, which was hugely helpful for me as a parent. But I felt really guilty about it. And like I don't know, like I just couldn't. And I actually had a babysitter teach me how to do it. I had hired her to come and take care of the kids while I went to yoga. And my kids were, grabbing onto my knees and crying, don't go, don't go. And she stepped up and she said, let's take a moment. Your mother is going somewhere to take care of herself. She will be back in an hour and a half. You will be okay. We're going to have a great time. And she modeled with her words and her body language how to basically give the kids confidence that this was going to happen. It was going to be okay. And that was that. And I learned from her. And I think, I remember that image often when I feel a little guilty about doing something for myself that I know is good. Knowing that in the long run, it's good for them too, right? But in the moment, sometimes I feel like, I don't know, maybe I should be cooking an elaborate meal instead of going for a walk or whatever. So I remember Eileen every time I have that feeling, and just how she put her body between my kid and me and was like, Mom is going to yoga. So I just wanted to share that. It's helped me.
I think that's great. I think Eileen did just what she needed to do for both of you, for your children and for you. And you're right. I don't know. There's something about when we become parents, we really kind of, we're able to extend that same sort of generosity to others, but not to ourselves. Like we tell other people to take a break, but we have a really hard time telling ourselves the same thing. And so sometimes you do need someone else to step in and give you permission. And it sounds like that's what Eileen was able to do.
So what happens if you have younger children and it's not as easy to just say, I'm out for a few minutes, I'm going to my bedroom, or I'm going on a walk? How do you do that and kind of, I don't want to say not feel guilty, but deal with the guilt?
Yeah, I think that's a really good distinction, Nancy. It's not, I think it's really, it's easy to say, oh, just don't feel bad. I think, but the reality is we do. And, maybe sometimes we'll have like a turning point moment, like Laura mentioned, and we're able to kind of, feel a little bit better, but it is a feeling that accompanies those times when we prioritize ourselves over our children, because there's always something you could do for your kids. There's always something else that they need. There's always some other way in which you could enrich their lives. And so that when you're taking time out for yourself, you are taking time away from your kids. You are.
Is there an optimal amount of time that a parent can say, this is how much time I'm taking, and this is okay. If I take more than that, I might feel like it's too much, but this is of the right amount of time? Or does that vary from parent to parent?
Yeah, I think, yes, I think definitely it varies from parent to parent. It varies depending on, your children and, how much time apart from you they can handle. But I think, I think what I would suggest with that is to, decide almost ahead of time, like kind of plan out your day and designate a segment of time that, maybe if your kids are young, that's when they're going to be napping, or, they're school age, that's when they're going to be in a class that they can handle, generally speaking, on their own, or whatever, designate a segment of time that you are going to give to yourself, and then protect that time. Don't, it's so easy to say, oh, okay, well, but I still have this one more thing to do, or, oh, this would be a great time to get in that other, that additional load of laundry, or send that email for work. And, I think being really determined to hold on to that time is really important, because as soon as you start making those concessions, you're essentially reinforcing to yourself that your time isn't that important. That time that you thought you were going to give to yourself, it's not that important. There are other things that are more important.
I think too, you were talking about tolerable frustration. If we schedule time to take care of ourselves, we give children a chance to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And we can figure out, how that works out for them. I remember when I would drop them off in at preschool, they were little. My heart would break. I mean, I just thought I was the worst parent for doing that to them. And they would cry. And then I would get a call from their teacher literally 10 minutes later saying, your child is perfectly fine. They're happy, they're playing. And they needed to do that for me in the beginning because I felt so much guilt. And eventually I just basically imagined that they were happy within minutes of me leaving. Whether or not it was true, I just had to tell myself that it was true. But regardless, that gave them a chance to be frustrated, to work through their feelings, right? So I think, just to deal with guilt, that's what I tell myself, that I'm doing them a favor by letting them, have to do something that's hard, whether it's a chore that I need them to do for me, but also for them so they can learn, or whether it's something else, just let them struggle a little bit and I can go take care of myself. This pandemic, we were talking a little bit about maybe there were some silver linings. One of the things that I had a hard time with in the beginning was just how many dishes were stacking up in the sink all the time, how many meals I was making. And that was my biggest complaint really about having everyone at home. And it occurred to me that my kids were old enough to be able to make one meal a week. So we paired up a child and a parent so that they could learn to cook. And the other kid would clean when his brother would cook. And I can't tell you how much relief that gave me mentally. Not to have to think about what to make every night was huge. And they weren't into it at first. They didn't know how to, they blah, blah, blah. And now they're fairly competent cooks. I mean, they can do for themselves. And I can see that there's pride there in being able to feed themselves. So I think that was an example in which my need for self-care led to them dealing with some frustration, which turned out to be manageable and eventually gave them a life skill. That's my one big accomplishment during the pandemic. They're learning to cook and me not having to make every meal. So
it's a win-win, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think those are both great examples of how you got something out of it and they did too. They got these real life skills and the confidence.
Julia, do you have something you want to share about something that you've done during the pandemic, or wish you'd done?
Well, it's been hard to do, but what I do some occasionally is take a bath. And when I go into the restroom, I tell people you cannot knock on the door unless it's an emergency. And it's taken, at the beginning, it took a while. They'd be, Mom, and I'm like, is it an emergency? No. Okay, then it can wait. That getting to them right away, letting them kind of work through what they need to figure out on their own, because it's me time. It doesn't happen too often, but, that's the quickest thing I could think of right now is that little bath, 10, 15 minutes away from everybody for myself and just, get everybody out of my mind for a little bit has been helpful. Doesn't happen often. I wish it could happen more, but it's been good. Yeah. Thank you.
I think that's great, Julia. And that's exactly, what I was saying earlier about making a plan and then sticking to it, and because there's always going to be a good reason to deviate from that plan and to sacrifice that time. But it's really great that you're able to assert those boundaries.
Well, yeah, I think unless it's an emergency or something that you really need to step into, sticking to your guns about just, even if it's 3 minutes, 5 minutes, sticking to your guns teaches them that you're setting up like these little parameters of, the boundary for me, because it'll, and especially since, I have 3 children, I have 2 girls, and, children mimic their parents, what they do. So in particular for my girls, I know that I'm, setting up a good example to them to give themselves some time for when they become mothers or get busier in life. So I think that's good too. It's beneficial.
That's great. Yeah.
Thank you. Christy, Sonia, I know you've had your hands full too during the pandemic. Was there anything you wanted to share about your attempts to self-care? Sonia?
Hi, hey.
Hi.
Hola, Muna. Hi, Muna.
Hola, buenos días.
Well, all that happened to me, all that you were saying, but I stopped doing lunch because they are here. The fridge is there. So my husband was telling me, I think the kids need to eat more because sometimes they are hungry. But I told him, I'm doing breakfast, dinner, the dishes and everything. So I think they are all enough to, to prepare a sandwich or eat fruit. So I started cooking, doing something for lunch. So, and now they are going to, Mom, I'm hungry. Okay, you can do something. I mean, prepare something for yourself, and now they are okay. So I think that helped me because I feel like I was doing too much, breakfast for everybody. So sometimes I took the breakfast to the rooms because they already were in class. So like a room service, and then the dishes, and then again the lunch, and then again the dishes. Too much laundry. So yeah, I stopped doing that, and they are helping me with their laundry. They fold all his clothes, their clothes. So yeah, has helped me.
You had to stand your ground there, Sonia. You had to stay firm, and because it's so easy to just kind of let the momentum just kind of get swept away, and okay, well, it's the next meal, it's the next meal, the next meal, and you had to really kind of stop and say, you know what? No, there's lunch is on you. You can take care of lunch. Yeah, that was good.
Laura, you're muted.
Thank you. I see Mercedes and Christy. Oh, hi, Christy. Did you want to share something about your attempts?
I mean, I'm mostly just interested in really listening to this. My kids are a little bit older. My oldest is in high school now. So I feel like I've really embraced the good enough parenting model at this point. But this has just brought a whole new set of challenges that I have had to try to navigate. And like primarily just my kids' mental health has really suffered. And that's been, I don't know, that's just been like my 15-year-old texted me late last night while I was hanging out with friends doing some of my self-care saying, I'm depressed, what should I do? And I just felt like, oh, it's hard. I don't have all the answers, So I'm really looking forward to him going back to school in person after spring break, because I think that's going to make a huge, huge difference. It's been a really hard time to be a teenager, stuck at home with parents and no friends.
Christy, I'm sure that was really difficult to hear or to get that text. But I'm also thinking that it was really great that it was your son, I think you said, your son was able to share that with you, that he felt safe enough to let you know that. And you're right, you don't necessarily have all the answers, but I think he must know that you are someone he can reach out to, and that you're going to do something about it, whether that's, encourage him to, go back to school after break, or, connect him with resources if that's necessary, or even just be there to let him talk it through with you. I think it's great that he let you know.
Well, and it's also good to hear that you are making time to be with friends, Christy. I miss my friends, and I don't know why I'm so isolated from them, because I could still talk on the phone. There's no germs there, but it's like a mindset, they tell us to isolate. We're like, okay, so glad to hear that you're able to do that. And we have Mercedes who's on her phone. I'm not sure, Mercedes, if you can, if you're able to share with us.
Hi.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So the question is, what are some things that we've done for self-care?
Yeah, or maybe even some adjustments that you've done during the pandemic to take care of yourself and your kids.
I have a toddler. So it's challenging in certain ways, but I'm also thankful it's not a school-age child, because I see parents struggling with that, and that just seems like a whole thing. So in a lot of ways, I feel fortunate. With my husband now working at home, one thing that we changed is mom gets to sleep in. So that's, I think, been huge in keeping my sanity, because he's up and already for work, and she can just play in the living room when he's working, and really there's no need to wake me up. And considering having a newborn, when she was newborn, and before that when he was working, and then before that when I was pregnant, I wasn't sleeping. It was like 2.5 years of not sleeping already. So I'm so thankful to actually get some real sleep now. And that's also resulted in more screen time, because he kind of has to turn the TV on to keep her from bothering him while he's working in the morning. So that I feel a little guilty about. I try to get up so it doesn't last too long, but I've also just kind of given into it a little bit. And the beginning of the pandemic, we ate a lot of comfort food and gained a bunch of weight. And we were drinking too much. But now we've started Noom, and I got my husband to do it too. So we're losing weight. And Noom also has all these suggestions on helping sleep schedule, de-stressing, helping you find ways to have a healthier lifestyle within your own lifestyle. So it's, you modify it to where it works for you. And I think that's helped both of us a lot. And feels good that we're being healthier and losing weight, and not just gaining weight and miserable. And gardening, sometimes I just have to go outside in my garden. That keeps me, it's like the beginning of the pandemic, I was out there a lot. Not so much now, I'm doing better. But that kind of was some me time, but also productive. Just in nature, I felt like I had more headspace. So those are some of the things that I've been doing.
That sounds great. Parents of older children forget about not sleeping. We take it for granted now that we can sleep whenever we want to, in theory. And I think it's fantastic that you took care of that one, that you're, because you can't parent properly if you haven't slept. You don't, your fuse is short, and it doesn't work out. So I love that you're getting more sleep. I really do.
Thank you. Yeah, it feels good.
That's great. All
Mercedes,
right.
I think it's great that you're, taking care of yourself on multiple levels, like the sleep that Laura mentioned, and then the weight nutrition program that you're on, spending time outside in the garden. I think there's, it's great that you've been able to identify various ways to nourish yourself and kind of recharge those batteries.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, it's been difficult, but I've always had a lot of things that I like to do, like hobbies and things. So just throwing myself into those things has made it easier. But I do see a lot of my friends just really, really struggling with the isolation in a way that it's not as hard for me. So not that it hasn't been difficult, but it's just, I'm a busybody maybe. I'm like
Thank you.
crashing right now while I'm talking to you.
Thank you, everyone, for sharing. I think, trying to take care of ourselves as parents is one of the hardest things that we do sometimes, because it's so natural to want to take care of our children. And so, just being purposeful about taking care of ourselves is really important. So I think, we've covered some important points. I really appreciate, Mona, your finding, the language to help us connect to, especially the concept of good enough parent. I can't tell you how important that is, as opposed to the perfect parent, whatever that is. It's like, yeah, I can be good enough. I can aim for that goal, knowing that it's actually good for our kids. I think that's the important thing, that it's a win-win, right? Because we get to give ourselves a little bit of grace and some space to take care of ourselves, knowing that, whatever discomfort or whatever perceived failings on our part, will likely give our children an opportunity to grow and develop and eventually be able to be more resilient in life, versus if we had done absolutely everything for them and not allowed them any discomforts. So I love that message. If nothing else, this is like, I'm just going to take this. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you all of you for being here today. It was really lovely to share with you and to hear your questions and to be able to have this open forum discussion. That was great.
All right. Well, if just a little housekeeping, I think one thing we would love is to have, I'm going to share my screen now again, is to have you, let me see, where are we? Right here. I'm going to put the link to our survey in the chat so that you can take that. Let me see here. I think I'm doing something weird. I'm going to stop sharing, I think. There we go. Okay. So I'll put this in the chat. If you wouldn't mind taking the survey, it's very short, just to give us some feedback on how the program worked for you. Also, if you didn't register for the program through the Penn website, please leave your email here in the chat so that we can send you follow-up materials. We will send out the slides, and also if we think of any other resources that might be helpful, we will send that to you too. Okay, good. Thank you, Julia.
I don't think you pasted the link in the chat yet, Laura.
Oh, you know why? Because I have it. I'm going to do this again. I had it as a direct message to somebody. There we go. Can you see it now?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
So we're going to give you a chance to click on that before we stop the program. And if you have any additional questions or ideas for another program that you would like, please send us an email. I'm going to put my email right here. It's pretty simple. It's laura@pennfamilies.org. Okay. Nancy, can you think of anything else we need to share with the group?
No, just that we're glad that you're able to participate. And as Laura said, if there's any questions or any other programs that you'd like to see us do, because we are small, we can do we can make changes pretty quickly. So if there's anything you think we can help with, or if anybody has any final words today, either final questions or final thoughts, we'd be happy to give you the floor.
I just want to say thank you for organizing this.
Our pleasure.
Thank you.
And I guess we'll see you all the week of April 13th. Huh?
Wait, what's April 13th?
Isn't that when school starts?
Or K through second?
K through
or is
five.
it
Through five.
Through five. Through five.
Okay, I'm like, what am I missing? Yeah, high schoolers are not going back yet, unfortunately, not at PUSD.
No.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for coming and for contributing. I really appreciate your participation. Okay, bye.
And
Take
care
care.
of yourself
Thank you.
this weekend.
Thank you,
Do
Mona,
something
again.
For yourself.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Mona, again.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks.